We've covered the basics, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go through taking food in from your mouth until the waste products come out your little poop chute. So we're going to start. I'm going to do each segment in a different video. So no video is going to be really, really long. So we're going to take a trip through the digestive system. Before we do that, just to share some pictures with you, this is back, I took these a long time ago, way before you guys were born. Back in the 90s, I was able to go to South Africa and Botswana, and we were fortunate enough to see a lion kill. And normally what happens is the female lions will make the kill, and then the males get to eat first, and then the cubs get to eat, and then the females finally get to eat after they've actually done the kill. But in this case, there were no male lions around. So the females did the kill. We were in the morning, we got to listen to, we knew something was going on because the birds were going nuts, and then the females did the kill. We did not see the kill, but this is actually a Cape buffalo right here, and this is an older one that they took down, and I actually think I have pictures of this older one. The night before, it was separated from the rest of the herd, and that's probably why they went after it. So these are just a few there. Kind of cool. Because there were no males around, they could eat, then relax, and eat. So they just kind of sat in the sun with their little bloody noses. This is one, it actually has the small intestine of the Cape buffalo in its mouth. So it was pretty cool to get to see that. Okay, so the process of digestion, we have to start at the beginning. So the parts here, and you'll have to write these down. Ingestion, so you're going to consume the food. Then it has to move. And the way it's going to move is through peristalsis, which is the automatic way that the smooth muscle contracts, again controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Then you have mechanical digestion, which we've talked about, chewing as well as bile, so not chemically breaking it down, but just making a big piece of food into a little piece of food. We'll talk about that. And then you have what's called chemical digestion, which we've talked about, which takes place when you go from large molecules to small molecules with the use of enzymes. And then remember, once you have it into small molecules, the other thing that has to happen is you have to absorb it. So you have to take those small molecules, they go through the lining of basically the small intestine into the bloodstream. And then whatever is left after you get through the small intestine, then down to the large intestine, whatever is left, you have to get out of your body. And that is called pooping. The technical word for that is defecation. And we will end with that at the end of the last video, maybe one of the last videos over the digestive system. All right, so give you a second. You can stop it if you need to get those written down because I know they're covered on yours. All right, so we're going to start in the mouth. So you consume food through your mouth. What are the functions of the oral cavity or the mouth? Mastication, which is not a bad word. It just means chewing. Okay, so this is mechanical digestion. It's just the technical word for chewing. Now, why do we have this? One, so you can swallow it. A big cookie is not going to fit down your throat or fit into your esophagus. You're also going to increase the surface area. So by making it into smaller pieces, you increase the surface area of the food, which means chemical digestion can happen more efficiently. The enzymes have more surface area to work on to make the big molecules into small. So that is the main advantage of, other than being able to swallow it, that is the main advantage of doing mechanical digestion, is the ability of the enzymes now to have more surface area. All right, you're also going to secrete saliva. Saliva is controlled by the autonomic nervous system when the parasympathetic is in control. One of the reasons you get dry mouth when you're very nervous is because your sympathetic nervous system is in control. That fight or flight is in control, and so your salivary glands kind of stop making saliva, and that means you get dry mouth. So that's one of the reasons that happens when you get nervous, like before a speech or something like that. So saliva is mostly water. It lubricates the food, which makes it easier to swallow. And it actually has your first enzyme that we're going to see, and that is salivary amylase. So ASE, again, remember that should remind you that it is an enzyme. It starts the chemical breakdown of carbohydrates, so making those larger polysaccharides and disaccharides into monosaccharides. Now, it doesn't do a lot of this. One little experiment, if you have nothing better to do at home, is if you take a cracker and like a saltine and you chew it, obviously it's going to taste salty because it's got salt on it, but you won't really have a sweet taste. But if you keep chewing it and keep chewing it and keep chewing it much longer than you normally would, so it stays in your mouth longer, that salivary amylase can actually start to break down a larger saccharide into monosaccharides, and you actually may get a little sweet taste, like a sugar taste in your mouth as it becomes monosaccharides. But normally when you chew a normal amount and then chew and then swallow, you're not going to get that sweet taste or much digestion of carbohydrates. It also has antibacterial agents in it, so obviously when you're consuming something through your mouth, that is a very susceptible area to bring something in that could cause you to get sick. The first line of defense you have is first taste. If it's bitter or sour and it could be poison, you're going to spit it out. But if there's something like, let's say, a fly landed on your food and pooped on it, which probably has happened, and you've probably eaten fly poop, what will happen is these antibacterial agents in your saliva will help get rid of that. Your stomach will also play a role. All right, so what controls salivation? Parasympathetic, we've talked about that. Again, when you're nervous and your sympathetic is in control, your saliva glands will kind of shut down, and that's why you get dry mouth. In your mouth, between mastication and saliva, you produce what is called a bolus. So that point where you chew it and then you want to be gross, and so you open your mouth and go, look at what I get in my mouth. That is actually a bolus, and that is what you are going to swallow. The process of swallowing, the technical word for it is deglutition. If you're going to swallow a sword, which I don't recommend, you have to overcome many reflexes. Your body obviously doesn't want you swallowing a sword, so that would not be a good thing. So you have 22 separate muscle groups that are involved with that. There are different phases to swallowing. The buccal phase is voluntary, which means that you are thinking about it. Even though you might not think you're thinking about it, you are making a conscious choice in most cases to swallow. Once that happens and it hits a certain part of your esophagus and you hit that smooth muscle, then what's going to happen is the last two phases of deglutition or swallowing are going to be involuntary. And again, we have a reflex here. It hits the esophagus, there's a stretch there. This involuntary control with a longer reflex through the medulla and pons will then start the process of peristalsis. You don't have to think about the food going down at that point. It will just happen again voluntarily. Now, we talked about this a little bit in the anatomy, the larynx and pharynx. Okay. The larynx and pharynx, what happens here? Here you've got the esophagus. Okay. Here you've got the pharynx here, nasopharynx, oropharynx. Okay. Here you've got the epiglottis, which is going to block the trachea where air is going to go. All right, so the epiglottis, what normally happens is you chew, you swallow, the epiglottis should go down, and that forces the food to go to the esophagus. Okay. So that epiglottis is where air goes in and out. Now, the epiglottis is up when air is coming out when you are speaking. Okay, when you are speaking, the epiglottis is up so air can go out because you speak primarily when you are breathing out. And that epiglottis, when you're swallowing, then should go down and protect or force the food to go back to the esophagus, protecting it from going down the trachea and causing choking. Now, what choking is when you get a piece of food that gets stuck here. There's a reason why your guardian, parents, whoever raised you, told you not to talk while you were eating. Because if you're talking when you're eating, your epiglottis is up. So air goes out as you talk, but if food goes down at the same time when the epiglottis is up, then that can get stuck, and that causes choking. So one of the ways you know for sure that a person's choking, if they're coughing, right, they're coughing, the universal symbol is for someone to put their hands up to their throat. If they're doing that and they're coughing, you just tell them to keep coughing. That means that it's not stuck, and that coughing will help get rid of it. If they have the hands up to the throat and they are not breathing, they cannot speak. Can you speak? And nothing comes out, or a high-pitched squeal comes out, that means that something is stuck in there and that you need to do something. That something is the Heimlich maneuver. Just make sure you learn how to do that so you know what you're doing when you do that. So that is why you don't eat and talk at the same time. Another thing that's common, not common, but happens is if a person is drunk, okay, has had too much alcohol, their epiglottis becomes drunk too. And so what happens is it doesn't, oh, I don't know what to do. Okay, the epiglottis is drunk. If the epiglottis comes up when it should be down, again, it's more likely to choke when you are drinking because, again, your epiglottis doesn't respond the way that it should. Okay, so again, you're going to form a bolus. You have the voluntary swallow, buccal phase, and then the last 2 phases of deglutition is going to be involuntary, and it's going to head by peristalsis down the esophagus, okay, down the esophagus. The esophagus to the stomach is going to happen through peristalsis, okay, through peristalsis. Again, involuntary smooth muscle contraction controlled by the autonomic nervous system. What's going to happen is you've got this alimentary tract that we've talked about, digestive tract, that is esophagus to stomach to small intestine to large intestine. Between, or what separates these organs from each other, are what are called sphincters. Okay, and I like that word, sphincter. If you get mad at someone, just call them a sphincter. If you're really mad at them, call them an anal sphincter. And we will talk about those later. So you have this muscularis layer that becomes more significant. Remember, the muscularis layer is significant in the transition from one organ to another. So the sphincter can constrict, which closes off the organ, or it can dilate, which allows the foodstuff to move in. So you have a sphincter, the gastroesophageal sphincter, or the cardiac sphincter, that exists between the stomach and the esophagus. This sphincter is important not only for allowing the stomach to control what goes in, okay, but also for keeping the acid in the stomach from leaving the stomach. The stomach has a pH of 2. It's very acidic, and we will talk about that as we move into the stomach. But that's fine as long as that acidity stays in the stomach, okay, stays in the stomach. If that acidity, and you've heard of this, heartburn, okay, or GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disorder, if that acidity from the stomach gets into the esophagus, then the esophagus is not physically designed to handle that acidity, and that can be dangerous. So you hear about heartburn, okay, heartburn, or GERD, like I called it, the more technical term. What happens, like if someone eats right before they go to sleep, one of the things that keeps food down in the stomach is gravity. So if you eat a lot before you go to sleep and you lay down, what can happen is that sphincter, that cardiac sphincter between the stomach and the esophagus, can relax, and that acidity from the stomach can get into the esophagus, and it can actually cause, over a long term, it can cause an ulcer in the esophagus, and over a long term it can actually lead to, or make it more likely for a person to develop esophagus cancer, because that, again, that acidity, the stomach is designed to handle that, and the esophagus, the lining of the esophagus, is not, okay, is not designed to do that. Okay, one more thing. We're kind of to the stomach, but there's one more thing I want to cover here. So the stomach's going to be temporary storage, and we'll talk about what it does in the next video. When it's in the stomach, it's called chyme. Okay, and this is just so you have it in writing what acid reflux is when that sphincter relaxes. I will tell you, they'll try to control it with medication. Again, what you eat can contribute to acid reflux. Some people, that sphincter, they have to go in and tighten it. It just doesn't respond the way that it should, and that acid can get back up into the esophagus. So that's what acid reflux is. So make sure you know that. So this is the end of this video. In the next video, we will start the process of what goes on in the stomach. We'll start getting into more little reflexes and also some of the hormones that are going to be involved in digestion. Again, make sure you can answer the objective questions for this video. All right, so long.